Welcome to the Dynamics SL Advanced Learning Program. I'm Brian Dietz, President of Brittenford Systems, and I'll be your host for the next 45 minutes. Today's topic is how to strengthen internal controls with Dynamics SL, and joining me today will be Kristen Foos. Welcome, Kristen.
Good morning.
The Dynamics SL Advanced Learning Program is hosted by Brittenford Systems, and at Brittenford Systems we specialize in Microsoft Business Software implementation, support, and training. As I said, today's class will be led by Kristen Foos. Kristen is an SL Master Certified Consultant and also a certified Microsoft trainer. Kristen has been a frequent instructor at many of our Dynamics SL, FRX, and Forecaster classroom training, and I'm sure several of you have met Kristen. I'll be hosting today's session, and as I mentioned, I'm president of Brittenford Systems. I was a former CFO and end user of Dynamics SL. I also was an auditor with PricewaterhouseCoopers for 11 years, so I know a lot about today's topic on internal controls. Sometimes I know too much about it, but I have some relevant experience in dealing with that. The Dynamics SL Advanced Learning Program is a webinar-based training on the second Wednesday of every month, and with the Advanced Learning Program, it has a single annual tuition for everyone in your organization, and the topics for the Advanced Learning Program are developed from your input, and you can submit your questions to us at myslquestions.com, and that is actually how we come up with the topics for these sessions. Just a few things before we get started. I do have to apologize. The handout that we sent out last week, as I converted it to PDF, the images didn't convert properly, but you can download a updated version of that. And in the upper right corner, it looks like 3 sheets of paper, and you can click on that, and you can download that. We'll also be sending out updated handouts after the session with the responses filled out. So I do apologize for some of the images on the handouts if you got them. They didn't come across properly. Your input on these sessions is very important. So if you have a question, up on the top toolbar, there's a Q&A. And if you could ask a question as we go through, and it can be anywhere in the presentation, and I will moderate those and ask those to Kristen so we get your feedback on these sessions and get your input. Please don't raise your hand. I think there's an option there for that. Just type in your question. It's a lot easier for me to follow through with you on where things are. As I said, we do a lot of classroom training, and here's just a few classes are there. Just to note, the Power Excel class for tomorrow, we have 1 to 2 seats available. And if you're interested in taking that class, there is a 25% discount on the normal price for that class, and you just use the promotion code ALP, and that will give you that. Also, it's not on the schedule, but we did put 2 classes on just because of requests for Dynamics SL AR and AP, and they run next Wednesday and Thursday. Accounts receivable on Wednesday, accounts payable on Thursday. If you sign up for those classes, there's a 10% discount just for participants in the Advanced Learning Program. So the question that really comes up, and we got this from your input, are there tools in Dynamics SL to strengthen internal controls? And I guess question, Kristen, why is that important?
It's important because with strong internal controls, you're providing checks and balances to safeguard your company's assets, which in a sense makes it easier to monitor what's happening within your business. And it's also a good way to protect your business from abuse and fraud, ensure that you're receiving the information that's accurate and timely, and that all regulatory requirements are being met. So with those tools, we can implement that in Dynamics SL effectively.
Okay. Well, here's a question for the students in the class. Wanted to get a sense of, are you currently using the Dynamics SL security features? And I'm going to just put up a quick poll here, and if you could go get your mouse and click on it, just give us some feedback here of, are you using them? Do you currently use the features in there? You know them, but you need to implement them, or don't even know what they are. And we'll just got a few people clicking through, so you can see we've got some people that actually are using it quite frequently, and there's quite a few people who want to know what they are, which is great. So for those few of you that are using it, if you could take your mouse and just go to the Q&A and just share with the class some of the things you've done with it and how you set those up, and we'll share those as we go forward. All right. Well, Kristen, what is you alluded to why internal controls are important, but within Dynamics SL, and having the ability to have security features, what business problems are they really addressing?
Well, several business problems that we need to address are the first one, unauthorized access to accounting data. A lot of times that clients will go and there's several users that have access to something that they should not be having access to. For instance, someone that's doing data entry should not have the ability to post in the GL maybe. So one of the things we can do with security is restrict the access to specific accounting data. Another thing I want to note is the importance of internal controls is being emphasized more and more, and there's an increased level of significance in businesses of all sizes. So, for instance, public companies, they're striving to be, compliant with SOX or Sarbanes-Oxley. You'll have the larger organizations as well that have this segregation of duties already in place, where specific employees are doing, their job functions. And then one issue with small companies I've noticed is maintaining effective internal controls becomes an issue because the segregation of duties, maybe they have less employees and they have to wear multiple hats in the organization. So we're going to look at ways around that where we can effectively maintain internal controls for all sizes of organizations. Time efficiency, the ability to set up users quickly and maintain them in SL. I have a lot of clients that aren't aware of the security model in Solomon or Dynamics SL, and we're going to show you how to effectively and efficiently maintain the security. And then by doing so, you'll notice granting access to the right information. That's a big one. Solomon provides the ability to grant access to specific companies, specific screens. So as I give an example, the ability to post information versus data entry. And you can limit who sees what reports, whether it's custom reports or out of the box that already come with Dynamics SL. And you can also limit access to specific modules in Solomon. So those are the business problems, and we're going to show you ways to implement this effectively.
Okay, I know in a lot of our clients, especially nonprofit clients in the past, this hasn't been an issue, but it seems to be becoming more and more where their auditors are really asking them questions about internal controls. Public companies, clients we've had, Sarbanes-Oxley's been out there for several years now. Everyone's been through that pain and suffering, but it does seem like I hear quite frequently not-for-profits and associations, or their auditors are asking more and more, and asking specifically about features within Dynamics SL.
Yes.
So let's talk about just some of the impact of, we've talked about some of the business problems, but what really is the impact of not having, proper internal controls in the system?
Well, the impact of not having proper internal controls, one is that you have employees viewing or modifying possibly data that they shouldn't have access to. You have the risk of significant data loss due to poor controls, such as fraud, bad data, inaccurate and unreliable information. And then also I've noticed it's very time consuming assigning access rights individually versus at the group level. We're going to look at the benefits of both.
Okay.
But that's the impact.
All righty. So it sounds like there is a solution in Dynamics SL to help deal with these business problems.
Yeah, so the solution, we're going to go through the entire security module within Solomon. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to create security groups and users. The next thing we're going to do is assign users to those groups. Third thing, we're going to assign access rights, and I'm going to go over the whole access rights module. And then the fourth thing that falls under this suite of security is how to change a password.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah.
And I guess the benefits of all this, when we go through all these things, we set them up, what's it going to do for our clients and the end users of Dynamics SL?
Well, one thing is they're going to have stronger internal controls, and it'll take a lot less time and effort to assign access rights once we go through this. Your accounting data will be a lot more secure. Users won't see modules or screens that they don't have access to. And then also one important feature is the sysadmin, which is the Solomon super user. They can add new users efficiently without IT's assistance. So you have the ability as a system administrator to use the administration functionality.
And I guess one benefit you haven't put on here, but being an ex-auditor, you avoid those management letter comments where they're saying, hey, you got poor internal control. So that's a key one. So, all right, as we dive into this, if you've got questions, please submit your questions in the Q&A button, and we can stop anywhere through the point if Kristen's hitting something. So please get your questions in there.
All right, so we're going to dive right into this. The first thing I want to go over is how to create security users and groups. In order to assign access rights, the user has to exist as well as a group. And my recommendation, and I'm going to reiterate this as we continue, but you're going to basically assign the access rights at the group level so you can stuff the user into that group. And by doing so, let's say the user leaves the organization, you don't have to reassign access rights to a specific user. Again, you can just create the new user and stuff them into the group.
Okay.
All right. So the next slide, I want to note that this is Solomon version 7.0. This is the new version of Solomon. I'm going to make, if you're on a prior version, I'll make references to how you're going to access it as well. So right now, you'll notice I have circled in the security module. This is located under the administration toolbar on the left-hand side. And the module...
So now, is this a typical thing that most users would see, administration, or is this the system administrator?
This is a system administrator. I would see this, so you can limit who has access to this information. Okay. And the system manager module is the module that you would find all the security functionality with. And one thing I want to note is if you're using a prior version, this menu can be accessed via the utility menu. In the drop-down, you're going to see all these same exact screens.
Okay.
Okay. So the first thing I want to go over is how to create a new user. You can do that through the window User Maintenance. So let me focus on that. So creating a new user under User Maintenance, you would select that screen, and this is what the User Maintenance window looks like. And you'll notice it doesn't look very different from what's in the prior version as well. Now you'll notice there's a user ID, a name, and we're going to go through all these different fields. If you want to create a brand new user, right now we could just type in, I put in my name right here, Kay Foose. A lot of times at clients I'll see first initial last name. You can set it however you want. If you want it to be like their Windows login, you can put that in as well. And then that is a required field. The name is optional. So I put in Kristen Foose, that's my name. And you'll notice on the bottom section of this, I can put in an email address. More importantly, and that's optional as well, more importantly, the password must be strong. And by strong, what I mean is if you try to save this, go to the next slide, it's going to give you this error message if it's not strong. So what a strong password is, it must have, and it says up here, it has to be at least 6 characters in length, and it has to have characters from the following 3 categories, 1 uppercase, 1 lowercase, and at least 1 number. So that's what a strong password is. You want to make sure you enforce this or else it won't let you save the information.
Okay.
One other important thing, so that's
go back to on that one screen there. The email address, actually you can click forward there.
Okay.
What's the importance of the email address on this screen? You said it was optional, but why would people actually use the email address?
That's a great question because if you'll notice the little checkbox above the telephone where it says Active Application Server User, if you want to use the application server to send emails for different reports, you have to have your email address in there. If you don't have application server, then you don't ever need to worry about that. But that would be the significance of it.
Okay.
And you'll also notice on this slide, in this version as well as prior versions, your sample required field is in that light green color. And I know that if you're seeing all your required fields in that light green color and you can't tell that it's a required field, you need to go into User Maintenance and select the Pick Color for Required Fields button.
No, I can see that. Yeah, that screen right now. That's an awful color there. Yep.
Exactly. And I've had a lot of clients come to me and say, "Oh, that's why it's it's in green. All I need to do is go into User Maintenance and change it to red." So you have to do that for every single user. When you set them up, you might as well just do it while you're in that screen initially, because in Solomon, every screen has required fields, and you want to make sure that they pop out at you.
Okay.
Okay. And then one new feature that you'll notice on the bottom in this version is you'll see the arrow pointing to the home page. You can add a home page for the user, for specific users, a lot of times, and when they log in, that internet site is going to become available for them, kind of like on their homepage. And I've seen examples of this, maybe the company intranet, or if you're using Business Portal, then it's all right there in front of you and you can access it from there. So that's a new feature that's added with Solomon 7.0.
Okay. And I got a question here from Matt, and he just, since you're on the screen, wanted to know what's the relevance of the location field and why is that important?
The location field is it's informational. Same with the telephone field. It's just informational for those users.
Okay.
So the next screen, one thing I didn't note right here, we're using SQL authentication. When someone sets your database out, they have to select whether it's SQL or Windows authentication. For the end user, if you're not sure, if you open up user maintenance and you see a password field right here, like you see the little asterisks in there, that means you're using SQL authentication, so you don't need to worry about it. But if I go to the next slide, if you see this, where it says Windows username and there's no place to put in a password, that means you're using Windows authentication. And what you're going to need to do is it's using something on the back end that your IT department has set up called Active Directory. And you need to put in the domain name, a backslash, and then whatever their Windows login is. And by Windows, I mean whatever they're logging into their computer as. So one thing I do recommend is if you're not sure and you're setting up new users, go into the user ID field and press F3, look up an existing user, and see how theirs is set up, because that I put Brittonford, our domain, in there, but yours is going to be something different. So you can just look at how theirs is set up and continue forward.
Okay.
Okay? So adding a user, we've added a user ID, an optional name, password, if you wanted to add the email address, if you're using Windows authentication, and just make sure that sample required field is set to red or something that's obvious. So that's how you would add a user, and the significance of adding them first, because when we create a group, we need to have the user set up in order to assign them to that group. So the next slide I want to jump to is creating new groups, and that's still the first bullet point in our solution, creating new groups. Group maintenance. You're going to access it the same exact way by going to the Administration toolbar, System Manager, and it's under the Security grouping. So we'll click on Group Maintenance, and you'll notice the group ID is in red. That's a required field. We're just going to create a group, and you can type it in directly within here. So this is what it looks like before, and then all I can do is I can type in the group ID, and it's limited to 16 characters, as I noted on the screen, and then you can put in a group name. Now, some examples of groups that I have seen, I've seen something like I have here, AP Manager, AP Clerk, GL Manager, GL Clerk, so there's that segregation of duties by job function. I've also seen group IDs created by position. Let's say it was Senior Accountant or Staff Accountant, Manager, Director, bookkeeper. I've seen instances like that as well. So you can create a grouping convention however you want. Just keep in mind that you're going to be assigning access rights to those group IDs. So you want to think of something that's consistent and, users can be stuffed into these groups and inherit those rights.
Okay.
Okay? And you'll also notice where my cursor is, the user ID field is in red. We're going to learn in a later step how to assign users to specific groups. Right now I'm focusing just on creating them. So we'll look at that later. And then the home page on the bottom, where it gives our website again, you can also assign websites via group as opposed to at the individual level. So everybody in that group can inherit maybe that intranet that I was telling you about, or business portal, or your home page, or something like that. So that's an added feature in SL7 as well.
Okay.
Okay. So we've created a user, we've created the group, and now our next step is going to be assign those users to groups. So we've created them separately. Now we're going to merge them together into a group. So there's two different ways that you can add users to groups. You can do it through group maintenance, which is the screen we were just looking at, or you can do it through user maintenance, which was the first screen we looked at. And it's all located the same under the Administration toolbar under the Security group. The first one we're going to look at is group maintenance, assigning users to groups through group maintenance. The significance of adding users to groups through group maintenance is, let's say I set up a brand new group and 3 individuals need to be assigned to that group. It's easier to do it through group maintenance because I can select the group and associate those 3 users to that one specific group in here. So that's a way to do it more effectively. Right now, what I did in here, I'm going to go into group maintenance. I'm going to go to the group ID field and press F3. Once I press F3, I'm going to see a list of all the different groups that I have set up in SL. So you'll see I have stuff like AP Clerk, Manager, GL Clerk, GL Manager. I select that, and then you'll notice once I select it, that user ID field becomes red. What I need to do from within here is the user ID field. I press F3 in here, and it's going to give me a list of all the available user IDs. So that's why I wanted to show you how to set up the user IDs first and then doing the group, because that has to exist before you can assign it to a group.
Okay.
So,
Kristen, I got a question here before you move on.
Sure.
It's from Michelle. Actually asked a question about the sysadmin and wondering, does the sysadmin need to be part of every group?
It does not. It automatically inherits every single right within Solomon by default.
Okay.
Yep. Because, and you'll notice when we get to the access rights screens, if you try to select the sysadmin to associate access rights to, it gives you an error and it won't let you because it already knows to have that set up. So on the back end, the sysadmin has everything.
Okay.
Great question. Yep. So this is one way, and then once you select it, this is the end result. So I have my group ID in there, and then the user, and like in my example where I said you want to assign 3 users, I would just go to the next line, press F3, and continue to add to this group. Then I could save it, and then they would automatically be in that group. So the benefit of this is when we go to assign access rights, I'm assigning it at the group, and I can stuff users into that group as opposed to having to assign everything on an individual basis.
Okay. Actually, I have a question here from Alex. And as you're going through this, it sounds great. And I guess Alex's question is their auditors are asking them to document better their SL internal controls. And is there a feature or tool, or are you going to address, how you could document this better as you set up these groups and who can do what?
There's a few third-party tools, and we're going to get to that slide as well. And there's also reports that you can print out to show every single access right that this group or this user has.
Okay.
Okay. So I'll definitely get to those questions.
Great question, Alex.
Yes. So once you create the groups, or you assign the users to the groups, that's the first way you can do it, through group maintenance. Now, one thing I do want to note, this is a side note for everyone that's using the new version of Solomon 7.0, and we found this out too. There is a group ID called Everyone. I don't know if you've seen that in there already, but every single person within this, and I added sysadmin, I didn't need to for the question that was asked before, but every single person that's set up, user ID, needs to be associated with this Everyone group. If they're not, what's going to happen, and this is system created, you don't have to create the group called Everyone, it automatically does it for you. What's going to happen if you don't put them into this group, the first time they log in, you're going to see this view where it says all modules as opposed to broken out by financial, project, inventory, all of them grouped nicely, and all the modules are going to appear on the left-hand side, and you're not going to see anything on the right-hand side. So it doesn't group it together. So once you assign them to the Everyone group, when you log in, it'll automatically put it in those nice groupings that you're used to seeing, and you'll be able to access the modules on the right-hand side.
Okay.
So that's just a side note.
All right. And then you're going to move on. There's a question from Ravi, wanting to know, when you're talking about the home pages, probably the prior slide, if a user is assigned to multiple groups, but then the groups have different home pages, what happens?
The user homepage is going to override the group homepage. So if you associate it at the individual level, it's going to override the group level.
Okay, great question.
Yeah, so the homepage right there. So we looked at how to assign users to groups through group maintenance, and now we want to look at how to do it through user maintenance. So there's two ways. Like I said, with group maintenance, it's easier if you create a new group and you need to assign several individuals to that group than do it through group maintenance. Now, the benefits of doing it through user maintenance is I create a new employee and I need to add them to maybe 5 different groups. So from within here, I access the employee, and then on the Groups tab, I can insert several different groups, like the Everyone group. So from user maintenance, a user ID, I can press F3 in this field to look up the existing users. I have myself in there. I'm going to select. And then the next slide, I'm going to go to the Groups tab, and I can see the group ID. I could press F3 in this field to associate multiple groups to myself or to that user. Now, the benefit of the screen also, if you need to look up who's in what groups, because I've had instances at clients where we want to assign more rights to a specific group, well, I want to make sure that, the following individuals are in there, or, I'm not giving too many rights to different individuals. So what I can do from within here is I can press F3, and what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to select a specific group, AP Manager, and then I can save it, and then I'm automatically associated to that group. So there's 2 ways to do it, but if I needed to create a new user, you can do it from within that screen kind of as a one-stop shop if all of your groups are already created.
Okay, so where do you see most people setting this up? Is it doing groups and then assigning users, or users to groups, or it doesn't matter?
Most of the time, like let's say your organization already has all your groups set up, you just need to add new employees. The more efficient way to do it is through user maintenance, because you're creating a new employee and then you're assigning the specific groups that are already created to that user. So that's what I'll see. When I do new implementations, we create the groups, initially, and then we'll assign the users. Or you can do it after the fact too.
Okay.
All right. So we looked at how to add users to groups through both group maintenance and through user maintenance. Now the next step, once those users are stuffed into those groups, then we can assign access rights to those users or groups.
So
now
this is where all the controls come down at.
Yes, Ryan's exactly right. So what I recommend always, this is the best practice, is when you're assigning access rights, you're going to go to this Access Rights Maintenance window, and that's the 3rd screen underneath of that Administration toolbar, System Manager module, and it's under the Security grouping, and it's called Access Right Maintenance. And what's happening, and what I recommend, is to assign it at the group level, because like I said before, let's say an employee leaves the organization, and you've assigned access rights to that specific employee. Well, now you have to spend all your time and effort with that new user and associating those access rights to the user, when you could have assigned it initially at the group level and stuffed that new user directly into that group. And most IT departments follow the same methodology with Active Directory. So once I select the group, then you'll notice this group/user ID field, and then I can press F3 in there and select a specific group that I want to associate access rights to. So I'm going to select AP Clerk.
Okay.
So once I select,
No, go ahead.
Okay. So once I select that, now this is where I can specify, okay, do I want them to have the same access rights across all companies? Or do I want to limit it, okay, this company, I want them to be able to only do these certain things, and this company, I want them to do these certain things. So this is where you can assign it, if you have multi-company, what companies they have access to. If they're consistent all the way across, and they have access to every single company, and you want everything to be the same across the board, you're going to click that little checkbox on the upper right-hand corner that says All Companies, and then the word All will automatically populate into that company ID. So this scenario is saying I want it the same across all companies. Okay. One important thing you want to note that's circled on my screen is that preload button on the left-hand side. Now this is a really important feature. The preload allows you to select entire modules to assign, and the benefit of this, let me go to the next slide, is this screen will come up if you select the preload. Now let's say I'm doing something like an AP clerk. Maybe they don't have access to every screen in the AP module, but it's easier to add the entire module and take away as opposed to doing it all individually, because that could take a really long time. So it's more effective and efficient to select the whole module and take away as opposed to add individually. So you'll notice all the modules that you have access to or that you have in Solomon are going to appear in this window, and you can select it. If you want to select multiple ones, you'll just hold down the control button and select those ones, and then you're going to say OK. So in my example, I'm going to select accounts payable. Once I do that, you're going to notice all these screens and reports are populating in this window. So you'll notice if they have access to multiple modules, it's better to do it at the group level, like I was saying, as opposed to having to do this individually, especially if you're a large organization. So right now, my AP clerk, I want them to, you'll notice that there's a screen/report number, then the types of screen or report. It gives you the name of the screen, the module, and then there's a bunch of access rights to the right, which I'm going to cover in a second. For this example, AP clerk, I want them to have the ability to enter in vouchers into that voucher and adjustment entry window, but maybe I don't want them to have the ability to release batches. There's a release batches screen in AP. What I can do is I can take away or add screens within here by simply deleting it, or I can insert and add those screen or reports from within here. So one thing I do want to note really quickly is in my little note where it says, where do these screen and report numbers come from? If you've noticed, every screen in Solomon and every report has a number associated with it. So if you're in Solomon right now and you open up those screens, you'll notice they all have specific numbers. And every module is categorized by that first 2 digits. So AP starts with 03. And what that means is that Solomon has a good control system, and you can limit who sees what when they launch Solomon. So if I'm an AP clerk, I might not even know that the release batches window exists if I don't give them access to it. So every screen and report has a number so we can effectively assign access rights at that level. Now, you'll notice the types of screen/reports. I have highlighted on the right-hand side the different access rights. There's view, update, insert, delete, and initialization mode. The benefit of this, the way that it's categorized, is that it goes from lowest to highest. So lowest is that view level of access rights, and the highest is the delete. And then initialization mode is kind of like super user mode. And I'm going to go through the categories individually to explain what they do and what they mean.
Okay.
Okay. Now, on the left-hand side, I do want to note, like I said again, you can give them view rights to every single screen and report in that module. Or if you don't want the users to even know that those windows exist, I can come in on a line item basis and I can select, let's say, the void check entry. I don't want them to be able to void a check. I can highlight row 5 and press delete on my keyboard, or I can right-click and say delete. And now when they log in, they're not even going to see that screen. Whereas if you had it at view, they would be able to see it. They just couldn't do anything there. So you can take away, or you can make everything view access. So the next screen, I want to note, gives kind of an overview of what the different access rights mean. So we have the view level, where the user can only view data items. And I know I've had instances where in vendor maintenance in AP, let's say you don't want the person that's doing data entry to be able to add a new vendor. So what I've seen at clients is they'll make that screen view only, so the person that's doing the voucher and adjustment entry, they can view the vendors, but they can't add any vendors.
So that would be a good way to prevent, if someone's going to do some fraud, usually it's creating fictitious vendors, and that's a good way of limiting that.
Absolutely. And then I've also, the update, so it goes from lowest to highest, like I said before. The update option is where a user or a group can update existing information. Let's say that they have update rights to vendor maintenance. They can maybe go in and update the terms or the address, so they can update something that already exists. So that's the second level. The third is the insert level. So the user or group can insert new information into the screen. So in our example with vendor maintenance, if they have insert rights, they'll be able to insert a new vendor. Or let's say they want to insert new line items into our record. That's the insert level. The delete option, now don't be fooled, you can't delete vendor IDs if they have the delete option. It's going to be able, let's say we're doing a voucher, they can delete a line item in there if it's not released, or they can delete a document if it's on hold or released later. So it's not, you're not deleting an account in the chart of accounts, you're not deleting a vendor. It's more so for within the record, so information records from the screen. And then the
But I know we've got some more things you want to cover, so I think we can just summarize these and we can move on.
Absolutely. Yeah, initialization mode allows you to enter or modify balance fields, and one that this is commonly used for is 1099s in the vendor maintenance screen. If you need to initialize those balances or you need to modify those boxes, you can do that with initialization mode. One thing I do want to note, I've set up my user myself, and I've stuffed myself into a group. I've assigned those access rights, so those are the first 3 steps in the solution. Now what it's going to look like when I log into the company, and this is if I have access to the Everyone group, you'll notice all those bars on the left-hand side. I only have access to the information that I've set up in access rights maintenance. So this is kind of the end result. I only have access to accounts payable. I don't even know that the GL exists or the other modules in there are there. I only see what I'm supposed to see, therefore enhancing my efficiency. I'm not going to see stuff that I don't have access to. So with that being said, can I see this in a report? The answer is yes. You can see the access rights information in a report. In this version, it's still within that security. It's the same navigation that we saw before, but it's called the access rights report. In the prior versions, it's under the utility menu. So
this would be a great report that you could provide your auditors when they're asking about controls and who can do what.
Absolutely. Yeah, so, and you'll notice once I run this report, it's grouped by, first it'll show all the groups, and then it'll show the individual users. And you'll notice it has the view, update, insert, and it has every single screen, whether it's a screen or a report, that you can see within there. And one thing I do want to note with the reports, they're all view only anyways. There's no update, insert, or delete. So if you assign a report and they see that, they're going to be able to run it because it's view only. If you don't want them to be able to run the report, then you would delete it out of that access rights screen that we saw before.
Okay. And actually, since you're talking about that, Margaret actually had a question about that access rights screen. You don't have to go to it.
Okay.
But you had mentioned that you could delete the line item by right-clicking, but you just want to know if you didn't want them to view it, could you just unclick the X in the view box without deleting the line item?
Actually, if you uncheck that, it won't let you uncheck that. You basically have to eliminate it from the screen.
Okay.
Yep, great question. Now, the next thing that we need to talk about with the question says, are there any tools out there? And Brian, you might want to elaborate on this as well. But there's some third-party compliance tools that are available. I've had clients ask, is there anything within Solomon to provide an audit trail by user ID specifically, when it was changed, what was changed? And
so these are actually 2 that we've run across that clients have used, and it really depends on what you want and the issues that you're trying to address. But there are tools that build upon what's in Dynamics SL to give your auditors more information, and it really depends on the organization, on the level of audit tools you want out there. So KB Technologies has one, as well as FastPath. So those, if they come across or if there's a need for that, we could talk to you about specifically what would be the best fit.
Yep. And then the last thing on the solution list is how to change user passwords. So we've looked at creating security groups and users, assigning users to groups, assigning the access rights to those users and groups through the access rights maintenance window. And the last thing that falls into our suite of security is changing a password. So how can we change a password? There's actually 2 ways. The administrators can change passwords for users whenever they want. So whoever is the sysadmin, they can go into user maintenance and change it from within that screen. Or the second option is the Solomon users can change it themselves. So the first one I want to go over is, as an administrator changing your passwords, we would just go back to the user maintenance screen that we were looking at before, pressing F3 in the user ID field, selecting that user, and then we just put in a new password right here and make sure that it's at least 6 characters in length and strong, just like we were talking about before. So an administrator can do it for every single user. Whereas the next step is changing it as an end user, and what you would do is you'd go under the tools option, or the tools menu, and then they can set their own password. So, and it's the same in the prior versions as well. They can go under utility and change their own password, where you're putting in your old password and your new password.
Okay.
All right, and one thing I do want to note, Windows authenticated security systems, that if they want to change a password, that's done through their IT department in Active Directory. Okay?
Okay.
So that pretty much sums it up.
So going through today, why don't you recap for us what we've learned in today's class?
Okay. So yeah, we have learned how to create security groups and users. We'll create the users first, and then we can step them into those groups. And then we need to, like I said, assign those users to the groups. And best practice, step number 3, when you're assigning access rights, you want to do it at the user level, like I said, or at the group level, I apologize, you know, in case a user does leave. So you can assign those access rights to the groups, and then changing a password on your own or as the administrator.
Okay. We got several questions in the queue, but before we get to those, I want to just go over in your handout that we had sent out in advance or you've downloaded today, there were several blanks. I just want to run through the responses to these, so if you want to get your pencil down, pick it up, and go through this. On the first page, it was the impact, and it was employees viewing or modifying data they shouldn't have access to, risk of data loss due to poor controls, and also time-consuming and citing access rights. And then in the solution, we talked about creating users and groups. We can assign users to groups and save time when assigning access rights, or we can assign access rights to users and groups. And finally, we can reset the user's password. And the benefit to this is strong internal controls, less time and effort to assign access rights, accounting data be more secure, users will not be able to see module screens you don't want them to have access to, and the sysadmin can add new users efficiently without IT's assistance. And I'd say the final one is make your auditors happy and get no management letter comments. On the page 3 of 6, the security application can be accessed from the System Manager module under the Administration Wonderbar toolbar, and users can be added through the user maintenance, while groups can be added through group maintenance. And on the next page, access right maintenance allows administrators to define what screens and reports Dynamics SL users can see once they log into the application. And it's more efficient to assign access rights to groups because users assigned will automatically inherit those permissions. And finally, the last page, the preload screen window allows you to select entire modules to assign users and groups an access right maintenance screen. And administrators can change the password for all users in the user maintenance, whereas the SLN user can change their own password under Tools, Set Passwords. So before we get to a couple of questions that are out there, your feedback is actually very important to us and helpful as we go through and do these presentations. So if you could just take a second, I'm going to pull up a poll here, and if you could give us your feedback and just how likely is it that you'd recommend today's class to a friend or a colleague. And 6 would be very likely and 0 not likely. If you just take a second and click and let us know how this class was, and if it's something you would recommend to people. All righty. Just one more second. We have people responding. Okay. Thank you for that feedback. That's very important, and we do appreciate that. So as far as time, we are almost out of time, but we do have some questions in the queue. So Those of you that want to hang on, we'll get all the questions answered. If you get more questions, please let us know. Go to the Q&A item and you can give us there. If you have a question later on, you can go to myslquestion.com and submit them, and Kristen or I can get back to you on those specific questions so there's something there. So for those of you that want to drop off, because we try to keep this to 45 minutes, today's session I think it really can help you. There are tools in Dynamics SL that can help you improve your internal controls. It's just a matter of using those features and getting them set up. It's a little bit of time to do it, but it's well worth it, and I think you have a much stronger system. So those of you who are not using it, and early on we saw many of you weren't, you have a way of doing that, and we look forward to seeing you the second Wednesday of next month to cover this again. And for those of you that are still have questions, we'll go through the sort of the after session area here. And I see we've got a question from Ravi. Ravi wanted a copy of the PowerPoint handout, and we will send out the handout with the answers filled in for you. So that's something that we will send out to you. So those of you that maybe I was reading too fast or speaking too fast, but we'll send that out afterwards, as well as a copy or a link to a recording of this session. I had a question from Sam, and Sam wanted to know on the password reset, is there a feature within SL where it will set a automatic expiration date, like every 60 days you have to reset your password?
There's not. And under SQL, though, there is an option when you have your users. I mean, Solomon sits on top of SQL, so all the administration can be done through Solomon. From within SQL, there's a little checkbox when you're doing the users to say enforce password policy and then expiration. So like the next time the user logs in, they have to change it. But that would be more a question for your IT department that's maintaining SQL. For those, there's nothing in the box with Solomon for it to automatically have them reset every, a specific time period.
So if they're using Windows authentication as their login, then that's the way you can enforce that expiration period.
Right.
Okay. Great. And I got a question here from Mary wants to know, are users deleted simply by selecting the delete button when you had the user, you're setting up users, if you wanted to delete a user from the system, how do you do that?
Yes, what you would do is you'd go into user maintenance and you can highlight that user and you can select the delete button.
Okay, great. And I've got a question from Kelly. And Kelly was question when you had the all companies, and if you have multi-company, and say you've got 3 companies you want to have an employee access to, but not the third company, is there a way to easily copy those security rights just for those 3 companies, or do you have to set them up one by one?
That's a great question. What you can do within that screen is you can copy. The right click doesn't work in there to copy, but if you press Control-C, you can highlight and copy everything in the access rights, paste it out into Excel, and then copy it back into for the next company. So that'll save you a lot of time.
Okay, so within those screens, you do have the same cut, copy, paste functionality with any of the SL screens.
Right, exactly.
Okay, great.
And what I'll do a lot of times with new implementations as well, I'll put in that preload screens, I'll select all, and everyone, every single access rights for those modules will print out, and then I'll go through with, the person in charge and say, okay, do you want them to have access to this screen, this screen, this screen, and then I'll just take away from there.
Okay. A question from Jill. Jill wanted to know this really relates to the password, how do you know if you're using Windows authentication as your login?
What will happen, if you're using Windows authentication, if you go into user maintenance, you will see the field, I don't know if I have that up still, but you'll see a field that says Windows login, and there won't even be a field for a password. You'll only be able to put in the Windows login. So that's how you know if you're using Windows authentication. If there's a field that says password, that means you are not using Windows authentication. You're using the regular SQL authentication.
Okay. And what's the difference between the two as you're talking about Windows and SQL?
Great question. Windows authentication means that if you select the Solomon icon when you log in, it doesn't prompt you for a password. So what's going to happen is, once you launch it, you're automatically in the system. SQL authentication allows you have to put in a password and a user ID to log into Solomon. So that's the difference between both.
Okay. All righty, and Ravi, I think, is commenting here. I think it's really filling in. Said the users don't even get the login window for Windows authentication. So confirming what you said. I think Ravi.
Exactly. Some people like that, and some people don't. Some people, if you walk away from your desk and you have the Windows authentication, it still can be, somebody can access it if you forget to lock your computer. So that's the difference between the two, preference-wise.
And Steve had a question back to something you said about limiting access to setting up vendors. Could you go through that again on how you could strengthen controls on creating new vendors?
Creating new vendors by limiting access?
Yes. Well, what are specifically the steps on that?
So what you would do is in Access Rights Maintenance, you can select the vendor maintenance window, and then if you want to limit them, what you would do is probably just put view only for those specific users, and that way they can launch the screen and they can kind of research the vendor ID and everything related to that vendor, but then they won't be able to modify anything within there. And then maybe the AP manager is the one that's responsible for modifying the vendor ID, and creating the vendor, so you can give them all the way up to delete rights, which is going to be insert, update, and view, and they can access that.
Okay.
Okay.
All righty. I think we've got all the questions out there, but we'll hold on for one more minute or so. If any of you, I know there's several of you still on the call, and if you've got any final questions, get them logged in here, and while you've got Kristen in the class here. All righty. Well, it doesn't look like anyone has any final questions for you, Kristen. This is very helpful, and I know that it's a relevant topic. For those of you that stayed on for the extra session, these recordings are very helpful to you. There's things that when you go through audit season, I know your auditors will start asking more and more. We've seen that with our clients. So please use the features in SL to enhance your security, and then if there's additional things you need, there are some additional tools that work with SL directly that can build upon what's there. So with that, I think Kristen and I, I just got one question here. Okay, Ravi wanted to make sure he was on the mailing list, and we'll make sure of that. So sorry about that, Ravi. So as I said, with that, Kristen and I are going to sign off. I hope this was very helpful to you. Internal controls is not always the most exciting topic, but it's an important topic, and let's keep those management letter comments to none as best we can. And everyone have a great day, and we'll see you on the second Wednesday of next month.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.